northern Iraq, 1849. On the eastern bank of the Tigris River, near the city of Mosul, a team of archaeologists from the British Museum discovers thousands of clay tablets containing cuneiform script they believe to have been written by Babylonian priests in the 7th century BC. Among the tablets found were two mysterious relics that have become known as the Babylonian star catalogs. According to translations of the ancient text, these tablets describe the precise movements of various celestial bodies, now known as the zodiac.
We know so much about the history of Babylonia because of the excavation and deciphering of huge numbers of these cuneiform texts. They were steeped in a religious view of life, and intrinsic to their religion was devotion to the gods of the planets, different constellations. So this was what we could call the cosmic religion.
According to some researchers, these clay tablets provide proof that the ancient civilization of Babylon obtained celestial knowledge from star travelers.
The Babylonian star catalogs are an interesting collection of information with accurate mathematical equations, distance between planets, esoteric knowledge that a primitive civilization really shouldn't have. It really starts to raise the question as to how they got this information, what they were using it for. Was it possibly given to them by extraterrestrials that they claim were gods?
Like many other ancient cultures, the Babylonians describe Orion as both a constellation and a supreme being. In their writings, Orion is referred to as the loyal shepherd of heaven and the chief god of heavenly realms. Might these records actually provide more evidence connecting ancient man to otherworldly beings?
For the Babylonians, this constellation of Orion was called Sipazi Anna, which means the shepherd of Anu. Usually we would translate that the shepherd of heaven, because Anu was seen as the god of heaven. If we go back even further, we find an earlier depiction of Orion as in a bird-like form and was referred to as a messenger.
The figure of a bird was located on the stones behind the figure of the shepherd. His position may indicate that he was bringing messages back and forth from Earth to Orion. Now the real question is, how did he do this? Is this all meant to be taken symbolically? Is it possible that what we have here is a very rudimentary description of a type of interstellar communication device? Are the Babylonian star catalogs potentially even documenting an ancient extraterrestrial space station orbiting the Earth, inhabited by ancient aliens who came from Orion?
Angels. According to a Nielsen survey taken in 2010, nearly 70% of Americans believe in their existence. But what are they? Winged visitors from God as depicted in the Bible? Smiling cherubs who peer down at us from billowing clouds? Or something much, much more?
The concept of angels is obviously very widespread, certainly in American culture. And you find it in Latin culture, Greek culture, Babylonian culture.
When we think of angels, we immediately think to the Bible, but When you go onto the internet, when you read books, you will find that people have visitations of angels every single day.
In the Hebrew Bible's book of Genesis, angels first appear as divine beings, sent to earth as messengers of God.
They wanted to have God interacting with the human beings, but it seemed somewhat undignified to have God directly operating, and so he sent messengers.
The word angel is a mistranslation. In Hebrew, the word for angel is malach. However, the correct translation is not angel at all, but it is in fact messenger. In Greek, the word angelos is not angel. It is intermediary, middleman. And so what do we have in these stories? We have these intermediaries, these messengers, bringing information from quote-unquote God.
By definition, angels are otherworldly. Angels are extraterrestrial. They're not from this planet. So really, by definition, ETs and angels are the same. Now, our modern conception of ETs have changed, but go back thousands and thousands of years when angels lived among our biblical ancestors. They didn't call them ETs, they called them angels, but they knew they were not of this world, not of this planet.
But could some of these so-called messengers of God have served another function? One not so benevolent or benign. According to the book of Enoch, the so-called lost biblical text that was rediscovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls in the late 1940s, the first angels to arrive on Earth were the fallen angels.
It was on Mount Hermon that angels came down from the heavens, fallen angels, to inhabit Earth. They were trying to assume power, and because of that, they were cast out from heaven and cast down to Earth.
Now, to me, this sounds more of a mutiny story, where extraterrestrials arrived here and there was a type of rift, and so they split into two different factions. And the faction that split off is what today is referred to as the fallen angels.
Enoch was a believer in angels, fallen angels, visitations, but everything he put in his scriptures seemed to imply, to me, extraterrestrial visitation. From craft that he saw, to mountainsides that they would land, to them taking him around and telling him things.
Both in the book of Enoch and in the Hebrew Bible, the fallen angels act in direct opposition to God's will by interbreeding with humans.
In Genesis 6, it talks about the sons of gods, plural, mating with the daughters of men. And there was a certain evil connotation to it.
How can angels have sex? Enoch describes of it. Some of the extraterrestrials stood on Earth. They had sex with some of our girls. That is what is written down in Enoch. It's not my invention. Enoch never calls them gods. He calls them guardian of the skies or watchman.
According to one of the stories contained in the book of Genesis, angels were sent by God to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah because of the sins of their inhabitants. Only a righteous man named Lot, along with his family, was to be spared. But while making their escape, Lot's wife ignores the angel's warning not to look back, and upon gazing at the horror and devastation, is turned into a pillar of salt.
When you are at a nuclear testing range and you witness a nuclear blast, you're told to look away and not to look straight into the blast. And here we have a similar description in an ancient biblical text. where instructions were given, whatever you do, don't look back, because you will die. And sure enough, it happened to Lot's wife.
Could it be that the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is really a description of a nuclear explosion, similar to the one described in the Hindus' Mahabharata? Do the stories of the Mahabharata and the Bible represent actual historical events? For ancient astronaut theorists, the answer is a resounding yes. And they believe the so-called angels who brought forth the devastation were in fact beings from another planet. Alien visitors armed with advanced weaponry. September 2000, the Black Sea, Turkey. Marine archaeologist Robert Ballard and his team of underwater scientists discover what appears to be a farmhouse, some 330 feet below the surface. Estimates suggest the submerged dwelling to be approximately 7,500 years old. Ballard and other scholars speculated that rising ocean levels could have caused the Mediterranean Sea to burst through a natural dam, creating a flood so great it drowned an estimated 58,000 square miles under 500 feet of water. But more than finding the ruins of an ancient dwelling, had Ballard actually discovered proof that the biblical story of Noah and the Great Flood was true?
And those villages, of course, weren't built underwater. So Ballard concluded that the Black Sea, as we know it, was only created some 9,000 years ago. And that is exactly what we're talking about with Noah's Ark and the flood, the same area where all that happened. And in fact, mainstream archaeologists know that in the Mediterranean, there are over 200 known sunken cities. Those cities, too, were somehow flooded the same time that the Black Sea was flooded.
Also written in the book of Genesis, the story of Noah tells how God saw that the wickedness of man was great and decided to destroy all of creation. Only Noah, his family, and the animals aboard the ark were allowed to survive and repopulate the planet. But is this the whole story? Was Noah selected only for his virtue? Or was there another reason he was chosen to save the planet? Ancient astronaut theorists believe the Bible doesn't tell the whole story. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, a series of ancient texts, known as the Dead Sea Scrolls, were discovered in a cave located in what is now Israel's West Bank. Among the ancient writings are various stories not found in the traditional Hebrew Bible. One such story tells of Noah and his strange, miraculous birth.
One of the Dead Sea Scrolls is called the Lamech Scroll. What is Lamech? Lamech was a shepherd. And one day Lamech, his woman, was pregnant. And he said to her, "This is impossible. I was not here for months." But his woman, with the name Batenosh, swears, "No one touched me." But Lamech doesn't believe his wife Batenosh, and he goes to his father, which was Methuselah. And Methuselah says to Lamech, "I can't help you. I don't understand this. I believe your woman, Batenosh, that nobody touched her, and I believe you. So what should I do?" So Methuselah goes to his father, the grandfather now of Lamech. His name is Enoch. Now Enoch tells to Methuselah that the guardians of the sky have made an artificial insemination into the womb of Batenosh, the wife, and he should accept this child because this child would be the father of a new human generation. And in the Bible, this is Noah.
What if, as ancient astronaut theorists believe, the story of Lamech is true, and the guardians of the sky described in the story are in fact aliens? Does this mean that Noah was the product of an artificial insemination a genetic experiment performed by extraterrestrials? If so, what was the reason for the Great Flood?
Well, the reason for the flood, and we need to understand this, it tells us is that Noah was pure in all of his generations. What does that mean? Why would the account, specify pure in all his generations?
According to the Bible, God sent the flood because of man's wickedness and corruption. But ancient astronaut theorists believe the flood was actually a means of ridding the Earth of biological imperfections. By using Noah and his family, they could repopulate the planet with a genetically superior species.
Part of this human society is again genetically backward, closer to the animal. What can we do? These humans were spread out over the planet. So they said, we have to kill them all by a great flood. And then we have to restart again.
Another familiar element in the story of Noah involves the collection of animals brought aboard the ark. In the Bible, God commanded Noah to collect 2 of every kind of living creature: animal, bird, and insect. But many biblical scholars and theologians agree that such a task would have been both physically and biologically impossible. Could there be another, more scientific explanation?
The story of Noah's Ark is pretty implausible if you think about it. You have 2 animals of each creature on planet Earth on a boat. Not only would the boat have to be huge, but how are you going to collect every animal on the planet and put it on that ship? So, could it be possible that Noah's Ark was once again misunderstood technology, and Noah's Ark was a DNA bank?
Could it be a story? Could it be technology somehow gathering up all living things as in a DNA bank of some kind? It fits together, hard to imagine how that would happen so far back, but if it did happen, it would need to be told as a story, and the story of a boat works.
Perhaps this is really an extraterrestrial DNA bank as well. The extraterrestrials need plants and animals and minerals on this planet too. Just like when we go to Mars or something, we'll be using what we can use on that planet. So extraterrestrials coming here would want to do that as well. And if they knew that some cataclysm was coming, they too would want to preserve certain kinds of animals and plant life and create, what we think of as Noah's Ark.
The Hebrew Bible. In it, the book of Genesis describes how God created the first 2 humans, Adam and Eve, in the Garden of Eden, and told them to go forth and multiply. For centuries, scientists and theologians have debated whether this story of the creation of man was mere myth or historical fact.
The Torah mentions that humanity is made out of the dust of the earth, and that God breathed life into this to make us animated. Here is the breath of soul, the breath of vitality, the divine breath, which suggests that the spark, the life force that makes a human body tick, is divine in its nature.
In 1987, scholarly disagreements over the origin of man intensified, with the discovery that the genetic lineage of every living person could be traced back to a single woman who once lived in Africa.
It's pretty well established by now, particularly from the molecular, the DNA record, that Homo sapiens did originate at one place in Africa, and after having become fully modern in the sense of intellectually modern, spread out to occupy Europe, to occupy Eastern Asia, and the old world in general.
It's sometimes called the Eve model, not meaning that we're all descended from the same woman, but it does mean that there was a woman in that early human population migrating out of Africa who was the only female who who ultimately left her genes in every modern person.
But is it possible that mainstream science and the book of Genesis are both pointing to the same moment in ancient time when modern man first appeared on Earth?
The myth of Adam and Eve, I think, is not a myth. I think it's a true story. I think Adam and Eve were on this planet. They were the first human beings that we know of, and they helped populate this planet. What is the Garden of Eden? I think it just happened to be the area that the genetically manipulated human being, Adam and Eve, were placed. That's where they lived. That's where they started to breed, and that's where the populations of the planet started to grow.
If Adam and Eve actually had existed, as described in the Hebrew Bible, might this also mean that a serpent really did tempt them to eat from the tree of knowledge? And if so, might this account have been an effort to describe the sudden awakening of the modern human mind, when man first became an intelligent being?
In the Bible, it says that if you eat from this tree, you will be like God. Satan, in the form of a snake, tempts Adam and Eve and promises them that they will be like God. The knowledge that Adam and Eve acquire, as well as humanity in general, gives man the ability to eventually carry out genetic manipulations.
So what was this tree of knowledge? Is the tree of knowledge, in fact, the helical DNA sequencing in our own bodies that was genetically engineered by extraterrestrials 50,000 years ago so that we would have the abilities that we have today? In my mind, it's our DNA itself that is the tree of knowledge. But why was this suddenly a bad thing? It would seem that the aliens, some of them wanted us to have this knowledge, to be like the gods. But others said, no, no, man is not to have all of this knowledge. This is also the same story of the Greek god Prometheus, who, against the orders of the other gods, comes down to earth and gives mankind the knowledge of fire. But because of this gift to mankind, he himself, as a god, is like Satan. He's banished from the earth. And why? Because he helped mankind to have greater knowledge.
The whole idea or concept of Satan is based on a misunderstood visit by extraterrestrials in the remote past. According to the ancient astronaut theory, the reason why we have the idea of a Satan today is because there might have been some type of a mutiny between good and bad extraterrestrial factions in the remote past. And so the mutineers were cast out by the commander, and they became known as the evil, fallen angels, which they never were.
If, as ancient astronaut theorists believe, extraterrestrials were responsible for providing humans with intelligence, might they have also given man the ability to speak?
Our voice box, our larynx, is so different than the apes, even the chimpanzee, who is our closest cousin, that we're able to produce sounds and produce language. To a scientist today, that's almost like it was genetically designed so that we can say words and sing.
There really isn't anything more advanced than the human language. So many different cultures, dialects, languages around the world. And the very fact we can communicate on such a deep, extensive level, that really sets us apart from all other animals. Who invented language? Where did that come from? Was that something instilled in us? I think these are mysteries that, to a large degree, science and the world of history even, and archaeology, are still scrambling around for answers. Maybe we shouldn't be looking down here for answers. Maybe we should be looking up there.